As people join in, I'm just going to give a quick introduction. So about the talks, it's called the Matra, the Unplugged Live Talks by Matra, and the reason we're doing this is to kind of go behind the scenes, talk to some of our creatives from the country and hopefully beyond as well, but not talk to them about their work or their projects. That's something that we see rather often. It's something that we can find online. And is rather accessible. But what we want to do is we want to kind of dig behind, peel off the surfaces a little bit and find out what actually makes these guys tick. We've already had one conversation with Amrish Arora of Studio Lotus. Today we've got with us Akshat Bhatt of Architecture Discipline. Welcome, Akshat.
Hi.
Thank you for taking out your time. And on behalf of Matra Architects, I welcome everybody else on Instagram Live and on Zoom. This is an initiative by Matra and which is kind of thought of by Viren, who's also here with us today. Viren, would you like to say something?
Hi. Yes, I'm very glad that we have today Akshat. Akshat is a very dear friend. I know him for more than 20 years now. And we chose him, I think today, Mrinalini will say more about it, but we chose him today because I consider him among the most talented young architects and designers. In his case, one should use the word designer besides architecture, because his realm, his profile of work is extraordinary and surpasses even architecture. And I'm very glad to have him, that he agreed. And I'm expecting a lot of provocative conversation today.
Not a pressure, please. Oh God. Okay, so just before we start, I'm going to introduce Akshat. It's I've, like Viren said, that he's known him for more than 20 years. I've known him for almost 20 years, I would say. And it's an interesting story because I started architecture school in Delhi. I had just joined college and Akshat had just graduated. And he came back as faculty. And that's something that I want to also get into later. But when Akshat came back as faculty, you know, we have all kinds of faculty, right? You have the ones that you love, the ones that you don't like very much, the ones that you're indifferent to. And I'm going to take the liberty of being rather honest and candid in this conversation because I do consider him a friend now. He wasn't my favorite person. But I also have to say that there was always this enigma that surrounded him. And that enigma was very clearly that came from a certain sort of proficiency and capacity to embody what he believed in and the work that he did as an architect and as a designer that Viren mentioned. And so besides having been taught by him in first year of college, I also ended up working with him for a short summer break before I went off to university, where we literally sat in one little garage and, you know, I was doing drawing after drawing for him, which he still holds against me today. I hope you haven't dug out those elevations, right?
They're right here.
You better not.
Waiting for it's waiting for the moment.
Okay, so that's a little bit of a brief, and I think I'm really happy to have Akshat here today. So while he used to give us homework and give us all these crazy deadlines in college, the minute we decided to invite him for this chat, I found an opportunity to give him a task, something that I'd been waiting for the last 20 years. So I told Akshat to write a little bit about himself, which I think is one of the hardest things one can do. And I'm going to read out what he's written. He says, I've been studying architecture since 1997. My interest first peaked when I stumbled upon the works of Coop Himmelblau and then later the four big British architects, Fosters, Rogers, Hopkins, and Grimshaw. I went on to get a professional degree in architecture and over the years cemented my beliefs on progress, optimism, sustainable development, and a strong work ethic. Parallelly, I realized my attitude to music and my quest for progressive expression was being shaped by my engagement with the guitar as a musical instrument, which I began to study in 1993. The pursuit for the holy grail on strings led me to procure guitars, amplifiers, and devices, enough to fill a small house, he says. I am not a collector, I am a player and a tinkerer. Playing the guitar led me to progressive rock and metal music, which in turn, I believe, shaped my socio-political views. If I had to grade you, Akshat, I'd say you did pretty well on this one. Mm-hmm. But I want to start by asking you about your music. Everyone knows you as an architect, as a designer, but there is this other sort of personality that sits within you who is a diehard fan of guitars. And we'd like to know a little bit more about that. How did that start?
Well, it's actually, it's strange how some parts of your life are so clear, right? I remember I was 13. We'd just got cable TV at home, and we'd got cable TV with the excuse of watching CNN coverage for the Gulf War or something like that.
What year was this?
Must have been, I think, 92 or 91.
Okay.
And, you know, it was all regimental then. Like we were not allowed to watch anything else. So I think around 92, 93, I came back home and there was no one around, and I slipped in MTV. And the first song I saw, or the first scene I saw, was actually Slash playing in front of the church, and you know, like sort of the wind blowing towards him along with the dust. And he was playing the solo for November Rain, and it was I never heard music like that before. You know, I'd heard a little bit of Queen and whatnot at home, but I'd never heard proper at that time
something that intense.
Yeah, it was intense. And I think and that got me started, right? My dad just played the guitar, so I pulled his guitar out of the attic and started learning. And then I started on quest for a good teacher, and found a couple of guys to teach me. One thing led to the other, and I realized many things happened in between. But it was you know, playing the guitar was a good place to be when you're 13 and you're in high school.
Of course.
It opened out many other opportunities, and well, yeah, that's it. And then I think practicing sometimes. I mean, I didn't have to study because I didn't have to study. It wasn't that difficult to do what we had to do in high school. So I found myself stumbling onto more technical genres, like, you know, progressive metal, thrash metal, progressive jazz, some Mahavishnu orchestra, I remember. And and it was suddenly a lot more intense than Guns N' Roses. And in order to play that stuff, I had to sit at the edge of my bed and practice maybe 18 to 20 hours a day. And I did that for 7 years.
This was while you were in school?
This was while I was in school. And
how did you manage school?
I think except calculus and chemistry, everything else was easy.
So then you would say that you're a bright.
I seem to have dropped off Instagram now.
Oh, okay. Is it your connection?
It might just be. Just give me a second.
Sure, take your time.
I'll try and connect the Instagram to the Wi-Fi as well.
This is just another announcement for the people on Instagram Live. There is a time limit to these live videos, which is 60 minutes. And we don't have a restriction on the kind of conversation that we're having. So in case we cross 60 minutes, the live feed will shut down, but we will start it again. So be patient with us. If it drops, we'll come back online.
So a couple of people saying no audio on Instagram. Is it better now? Can you hear me, Ashmit? You said no audio. Suneet, you said no audio as well.
I'm being told that I'm audible, but Akshat is not.
Okay. So what does Akshat have to do to be audible?
Guys, just give us a second. It's a little bit of a challenge because these two platforms are very different. So audio is better on Zoom. One of the reasons it's better on Zoom is because we're connected directly to Zoom, and Instagram is sort of like a secondary stepchild. But
okay, better now, guys?
You're both audible, Ashwin says. Okay.
Oh, great.
Okay, cool. So we're back.
Perfect. Okay, we're back.
So yeah. So you were managing school and music, but obviously your interest in music was just phenomenal, right? At that point.
Yeah, I think no matter how much people curse it, if you were listening to mainstream rock and metal at that time, it was where you wanted to be. I mean, there was Queensryche, which had released an album called Operation Mindcrime, which was about, it was socio-political. Then Steve Vai had formed a new band called Vai, and they released an album called Sex and Religion. And Sex and Religion was, I used to have a music system that had a wake up timer. So my alarm was the first song from Sex and Religion, which was, well, the first sound at Sex and Religion is glass shattering. And then a guy goes into like this crazy blood curling scream. And it starts with a song called Here and Now, right? So Here and Now was, so that was my wake up. And it's a very loud, it was an insane song. And the third song is a song where Devin Townsend screams at such a high pitch and for so long that he actually passes out. Like the blood goes to his head, he passes out, and that's actually on the album. All that's happening. There were insane stuff, like the Black Crowes were playing. The Black Crowes, if anyone's heard them, had a song called Remedy. And just before it started, you would hear, an insane thing crashing into, like metal crashing. And you couldn't figure what the sound was in a studio. It was actually them driving their sound and throwing a mic into a dumpster and driving their sound engineer's car into that. So there was all sort of insanity. it was.
And you were just floored by this. Like music just kind of took over.
Free. Yeah, it was free. It was free, and it wasn't just free as irresponsible free. I mean, let's not forget the music I was listening to and playing could not have been played under intoxication. I mean, you had to be on top of your game at every level. So and by the way, that's where, if nobody knows, that's where I stole architecture discipline from. I stole the name, or the genesis of architecture discipline came from a video tutorial called Rock Discipline by John Petrucci, who would actually, and the video started with an hour and a half of stretching exercises before you actually started playing. So until today.
And you've mentioned that you do this as well.
Yeah. I need to do that, otherwise you cramp up. I've tried it, and so I'm not a bonfire strummer, right? I've never been into that. I can't play Happy Birthday on the guitar. I can play the pants of a lot of things, but I can't play Happy Birthday on the guitar.
But tell me something, if you were so crazy about the guitar and you had this passion, this burning fire, and you were doing it, I mean, the fact that you were practicing 17 to 18 hours a day, why don't we see you as a guitarist today? Why are we sitting over here talking to you as an architect?
So in the 90s, things are always bracketed. In the 90s, things were even more straitjacketed. I think there was no independent music really. The only way you could do music in India was either go to Bollywood, and I did have offers for that, or at that time. But it was always just like safe, like get a degree. I wanted to be an architect. No two ways about it. Since I was 13, I wanted to be an architect. That's well recorded, right? Well documented. Now, people have asked me, and I've said, how I got inspired to be an architect. It was only to collect stationery. But it was a thing to do, right? That because I didn't have to pass my board exams. I mean, I would just have to pass. I didn't really have to study.
Yeah.
So that's what I was geared for. And it was like, get a degree. Get a degree and then do what you want.
You know what, Akshat, most people, when they say get a degree, they go to Duke, do 3 years and they're done with it. And you, of all things, chose to do a 5-year professional course, which is really not the easiest of the lot. Or convenient for that matter, right?
It's not convenient, yes.
So my question being is that what made you, if you had the choice, you were clearly good in music, you enjoyed it, you were spending that kind of time doing it, and you were dedicated to that particular field. You were obviously fascinated by architecture, and I think it'd be worth sharing that story of when you kind of went and met your uncle and you kind of fell in love with the idea of it. But still, why, okay, why don't you tell us that story, and then maybe it'll be clearer to people why you chose one over the other.
So, the story of my becoming an architect started about the same time. My house was under construction. My mother was in London. She was studying, so I was alone with my father, and we had a couple of dogs, right? So we would be taken. Evening was time spent with my father. So, and I remember one day he took me to my uncle's house, and it's an apartment it was a newly done apartment at that time in Alaknanda, and he was the chief architect at Satish Gujal's office, and he was working on the plans to our house, to the extension of our house, and which is where I was going to live. And when I walked in, and he was like a tall, good-looking guy, salt and pepper hair, salt and pepper beard, and soft-spoken, and had every move he made, even on the dining table, like considered move. Like the way he'd sort of pick up every morsel and sort of, well, just his mannerisms were so unique and soft and gentle and precise. It was, you couldn't help but fall in love with him. And when I went to his house one evening to review the drawings to our for our house, and I mean, not review, I didn't understand anything. I went because my dad said, come along. Otherwise, you'll just order pizzas and hot chocolate fries from Nirla. So I went, and I saw him sitting on the ground. As you enter, there was a little niche in his house, and he was on the ground, and there was this A0 drawing board covered with those days blueprints and laminated blueprints with a very heavy parallel bar. And the parallel bar was probably one that he had fashioned himself, because I've never seen a parallel bar like that since. The heavy, wide parallel bar, and he was drawing out these plans on like a sort of silk fabric of sorts. I've never seen that. I have those plans. I still don't know what it is. Yeah, he was drawing on fabric. And he was drawing on fabric with, of course, technical pens, but he was also filling it in with technical pens. And the colors were flat primary colors, right? But like you're using, like you would use a marker, but these were wider and you could mix colors and all. I just fell in love with the stationery. I said, I want that. And of course, there were like very complicated sextants and compasses and dividers and all kinds of things. I said, I want that. And it's very expensive stationery. So they say, yeah, sure, you'll get it and you have to know how to use it, right? You can't fill an inking point for that. So he said, well, you have to become an architect for it. So I just went home and I declared to my grandfather that, I'm going to be an architect. And then it stayed. And then I think they were excited about it. So they all found out, what does he need to do to be an architect? And I got to know that I didn't really have to study. That meant, all I had to do was pass an aptitude test with drawing and whatnot. And till I was about 10 years old, I used to get good grades in art and drawing and whatnot. So I thought, I could do it when I was younger, so I'm sure I can do it now. And it gave me reason to, it gave me an excuse to just play the guitar. So I would listen to more music and go out and play. And I would be playing with my band till 12 o'clock at night. Then I come back home and still be, playing quietly in my bedroom and, fall off to sleep maybe 3, 4 in the morning and go back to school at 8.
So that was in school, but that's a hefty price to pay to, to get a degree, and that also architecture. And you figured that you didn't have to study in school to get into architecture, but what happened once you did get into architecture? What happened when you were in college? Were you able to still dedicate that much time to your music?
Well, in the first year, yes. So in the first year, actually, I worked on by the time I got into architecture school, I was already playing in studios and I was playing live gigs. Now, I was disenchanted by the
You
live
had a
gigs.
band, right?
I had a couple of bands, yes.
Okay.
Like I had a couple of bands, and I was by the way, I've uploaded some of my guitars on my B Takes Pictures Instagram account. And there's a checked guitar, a played guitar, which it's called the played guitar. It was played by a guy called Bruce Saraceno. It's called played because it's got Scottish checks, not because it's PLAID, not PLAYD. And I used to sort of walk around in the open with it. And those days you would either have a Maruti 800 or you would have to take an auto. That's the only way you'd get around. Now choose to take the auto because that means everyone you would see my guitar.
Oh.
It was an enviable guitar, right? And I would get compliments for it, of course. But I was playing progressive instrumental music on the guitar. So I was playing things like For the Love of God and Liberty by Steve Vai, which are very, very complex pieces. They're anthems, but they're complex pieces. And I would find
technical.
Very technical, like super technical. I can't play it now. And Dream Theater also. And so Dream Theater is sort of progressive metal with vocals, but still. And I would find people headbanging in front of me as if I was playing Metallica or Slayer. It's good music. It's there's a difference between music for art and music for musicianship, right? And I was doing that. And I would find the audience headbanging. So basically, they didn't get it. They got the image of the rock star or the rock musician, but they didn't get the music. So I said, quickly, I have to get out of here. And I can't do this anymore. And it's not like there were like clear-cut divisions, right? But I was disenchanted with playing live in India. It was anyway terrible sound and terrible whatnot. But I met a guy who asked me to start working for a music channel, which was MTV at the time. But by the time I started working with them, they became Channel V. And I recorded for a couple of albums. I met one of my best friends there while I was recording an album with in a newly made studio for 20th Century Fox. It was called USL Studios. So we spent about 2 weeks doing that.
The same as Butter.
No, it was run by the same guy who who I did Butter for, and Butter was my first project after architecture school.
And I'm going to slip that in. I made as-built drawings for Butter,
which I still can't find.
Oh, great!
It was orange and blue.
All hand drawn, huh? Yes.
It was orange and blue, and it was made from a studio that was red and black. It was called D-Monk, which was Manav and me.
Yes. And I was one of your first employees.
You were the first and only employee.
Oh, really? Didn't know about the only part of things.
Yeah, I think there was one more for a short while. It was a graphic designer. But that's it. So it's kind of like starting out from a garage, and and so when I spent 2 weeks recording in the most expensive studio in the country, and it was and then a month mastering it, right? And unfortunately, recording in India at that time was a very, very clinical process, right? You had to, and we were not recording on tape. We were recording on computers already, but there was something that there was what I think what I realized at that time was that if I have to make a living through music, be it live or in the studio, I would have to sort of dilute myself as a musician and an artist to do so. It could not be pure.
But
it had to be commercial.
But if you felt so strongly about it, did you never consider like moving out, going abroad, or just taking that passion and doing something with it?
I don't think you think that far. I was by then I was already in architecture school. I have always been averse. I don't know why. I've always been averse to going abroad. And
you tried convincing me once not to go to university.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So yeah, I've never been for it. I've never figured it. And there was a lot of opportunity here, and I was committed to being in at TVB. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I had friends, and by the way, I was at TVB because I was promised a new guitar every year. I got into SEPT and I got into TVB. And as my father was driving me at that time to buy my wardrobe for hostel, he said, listen, you're my only kid. If you stay, I'll get your guitar. And I said, that's it. I'm gonna stay. So I stayed, and I think
which was the other place where you were going otherwise?
SEPT.
SEPT. Okay.
SEPT Ahmedabad, yeah. And I think we were. I think
you think it was a good decision?
I do.
Yeah. Is that where your collection started from?
Well, I managed to acquire 3 guitars, a Marshall amplifier, and a couple of processors. So yeah, not bad for that time. Yeah.
And can we tell our humble audience what we've gathered or how we've kind of enhanced the collection since?
Oh yeah, sure. You can go ahead and tell them.
So no, I wouldn't know the details, but Akshat's got 70 odd guitars now?
Yeah.
And
I've got 70 guitars. I've got a few really good amplifiers, lots of pedals, lots of processors, all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's enough to fill a small apartment and more. So much so that they're all not in one place. And I have to say, I have an enviable collection. I mean, if I was not me, I would envy myself. I would envy my collection.
But I'm sure there are lots of people out there who feel that way right now.
Maybe.
How much stationery have you collected since?
Oh, a lot. But I've now decided to become a stationery minimalist since I hardly use it. Yes. So and now that we're basically relegated to an iPad and an Apple Pencil. So over the last year, I've just been giving stationery away to people, like not used stationery, but new, really nice stationery to everyone in the studio. So as a, as an occasion treat in general, or as a shabash, you get something out
I
of my
really
stationery as
hope
well,
this
which is a
interview
big draw.
is extremely engaging and exciting. I will be there to collect my
Yes,
rewards.
it really depends on the questions you ask and what you reveal. So far, you're all right.
So far, I'm doing okay.
Yeah, so far you're all right.
Well, let's change that a little bit. I want to understand from you, like, did you ever find it disappointing? I mean, you said that you were a little disenchanted by the music scene in Delhi, in India. You had various offers. You were doing really well in that aspect of things. You moved to architecture. You obviously, and we've talked about this earlier, that your practice of music. But did you never feel that, the disappointment that you faced in music, you could also face in anything else? So is that a way of kind of, denying yourself something that you want to do?
No, I feel that I have, I feel not doing it, or sort of keeping music to myself, has allowed me to keep it pure. So I start feeling like I'm not a puppet and I'm not a bard. That's how I felt when and if I want to play, like, it is visceral, right? It is emotive. So you may not be expressing your emotion verbally, but you're expressing on your instrument, and you're not doing that for people to clap. You may do it for appreciation, or at least I would may do it for appreciation. But if you want to be successful commercially in music, if you want to make a living from it, not about commercial, if you want to make a living, you're going to have to compromise. So I never did, and over time, and I think my last session was at Butter, or maybe after, maybe Flow. My last session was a couple of years after I started architecture discipline. But I was only doing sessions with a few people, a few dear friends, and once in a while, like, oh, you're sitting in the studio, oh, we need this, or, hey, I'll wing it, just for the hell of it, because you won't depend on it. So there was freedom, right, in what I do, and it's still that way. It's not like I can't play. I can still play well. I can't play as well as I used to. I can't play as well as I want to. I still play well, and when I play, it has to be really loud because I have non-master volume amplifiers. So a full Marshall, like when I play at home, then a lot of people can hear me, right? So it's these are amplifiers that never were meant to be turned down. They're just like full volume valve amplifiers. So so I play for myself, and I enjoy it because that's almost like meditation or cathartic to me. It's not meant for anyone else. It's not meant for anyone to appreciate or like. It's just meant for me to appreciate or like, and it's what I do. So while I was, there was a time when I was basically just playing the acoustic guitar and playing sort of resonant guitar, resonant chords, and just sort of enjoying myself with that. Sometimes I was just droning on the guitar. A couple of years ago, I discovered a metal form called djent, and I was playing a lot of djent. Is very, very heavy music, and I started enjoying djent. 2 years ago, I picked up two 8-string guitars, and I started playing 8, which is even lower and heavier and sort of deeper and darker music. But it's freedom, and I don't want to give that up. I'm happy to share. I think I've come to a place in my life where I'm happy to share my collection of music and my collection of guitars. So I have a separate Instagram account where I put out obscure music that I hear, and from bands that most people, which are not mainstream, but I think are really impressive. I make my connections, but it's pure, and I think for the longest time, architecture was supposed to be that as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because I mean, all your creative expression, right, with music, it's kind of become private, and you've pulled it into your own space. But architecture is also your creative expression, and that's something that you are now engaging the public with. But doesn't it hold the same risks? Doesn't it have the same values at the end of the day, where you are making compromises. You're not doing it for yourself. You're not necessarily doing things that, you want to do, or you might still be doing things you want to do, but it's still driven by a lot of external factors and agents. So are you saying that it's okay to do it like that in one and not in the other? Or was it just easier to keep music to yourself?
I think it was easier to keep music to myself, and it became that. Architecture, well, I had to earn a living, and I care for architecture. I love it. I mean, I got hooked onto architecture when I saw Coop Himmelblau's work. So for the first year in architecture school, I was just getting bored making these 10, 12, 14 feet orthogonal things, studying vernacular structure, saying, what is this? Because in music, we had gone, while I owned classic instruments from the 60s and 70s, I was never into classic rock. I mean, I can listen to a Led Zeppelin song, but I say, it's not moving beyond. But then now when you listen to guys like Steven Wilson or Guthrie Govan or Pliny or, Animals as leaders and whatnot, you realize that that's very different music. And I was searching for that in architecture, which I didn't find the first year. But in the second year, I remember it was Aruna who said, go to the bloody library. First week of second year, he said, go to the library. And that was the first time I walked in the library. And I walked in and I remember I had spent a lot of time with my grandfather sitting at the India International Center Library and reading the Encyclopedia Britannica. So I was kind of done with libraries. But when he sent me in there, because he almost kind of gave me that look, I'm going to flunk you if you don't. So I went. And I stumbled upon a book, like the big book, the big hardbound book. I don't remember what, may have been like a croquis or an AD monogram or something. And I saw the Rooftop Extension by Coop Himmelblau on the cover. And that was it. Like, that was virtuosity in architecture. And I say, if people can do that and that exists, then I want to do whatever they're doing. And that's how that started. And that got me hooked. And I think for the longest time, I think till about 2015, till we did 15 or 16, till we did the India Pavilion, we were in a very enviable place because we were not ever pushed around by clients. We could do what we wanted to do. We would pick. I never wanted to be a commercial studio. I wanted to be a mainstream studio. And I don't think anyone can say they don't want to be mainstream. Whatever you do, you need to have it seen. But when we were doing the Discovery Center and Ranakpur and 53 and even the India Pavilion, we weren't getting pushed around. We were doing what we wanted to do. And it's only then, maybe 2016 or something, we said, hey, we need to get a couple of clients who can challenge us beyond a certain point, which is when we started doing. And we realized that there was really that challenge in existence unless you're working at a certain scale in architecture. That challenge really didn't exist unless you went to some very specific people. It wasn't it's not strategized, but it was just like, it's getting too easy. Can we make it a little more difficult for ourselves?
But that seems to be like a recurring theme in your life, right? Like
masochism.
Yeah, I was not going to say that, but you did. But this whole idea of, you're trying different things and then you feel that, it's too easy. I want to do something more. So you have this constant need to challenge yourself, right? But would you say that you also strive for perfection? Or is that something?
Well, you could say, people tell me I'm a perfectionist, but I know I'm not perfect. So I don't know what that means. I mean, I'm told often that but I say, no, and you can ask the studio guys, right? I would say, stop, don't do any more often enough. But that's just so, right? Don't push it to an esoteric point where no one gets it and no one understands it. We still do it. We still push things to a certain point where no one gets it. And that's your learning. That's your deconstruction.
But do you do that with music as well? Do you ever tell yourself that, okay, this is enough and I'm going to stop now?
No.
Why not? Why the distinction between your two creative expressions?
Because architecture has to manifest itself and last beyond you. It has to last beyond me. That's last. And it's not necessary that a strong design or a strong design statement will last forever. It's a strong design for the moment. right? So you do need to temper your architectural emotions to last beyond a couple of generations. So you need to temper them. It's not set design. So maybe if I was a set designer or a theater designer, or doing a little object, like maybe even a piece of furniture, you could do so. But most architecture, for the kind of work we do, besides the homes, you have to, and even homes for that matter, need to last a couple of generations. Now,
but that's in what you construct and what you build, right? But in what I'm also meaning to ask is that when you talk about music and you talk about playing the guitar, that's a very personal exercise for you, right? And that's why you don't put that restriction on yourself. Instead, what you're doing is you're putting immense expectations and pressure on yourself to perform in a certain way. And the only judge of that performance is you yourself. In architecture, why do we feel that I understand the context and I understand that we've got this responsibility and everything, but why do we allow ourselves to hold back in our design process? So even there, like the personal journey can still be, or can still strive for that.
No,
or
so
do we do that?
I believe we do. In at architecture discipline, I believe we do. And there are paths you'll take where you'll reach somewhere. Sometimes you feel that sometimes you're struggling with an idea too much and you realize you're not good enough at that stage, right? And you need to work more on yourself before you come to that point where you can realize that idea again. So, and there are two ways to do it. Either you buy more time or you buy yourself more skill.
Yeah.
Right? You can never buy yourself more character. The character is something that you have or don't have, right?
Sure.
So I'd like to believe that me and then whatever's been induced and whatever's been brought on from outside into the studio comes with that character. And we do a lot of design exercises which don't see the light of day, which often are good enough to show to somebody, but sometimes you don't show them because you know for a fact that you can't take it to its logical end, to a logical manifestation, without compromising on longevity or certain parameters of certain parameters we set out for yourself: longevity, sustainability, sort of serviceability, maintainability, a cost parameter. Like we're not sort of bound to a cost, but we take it seriously.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
There are project budgets and timelines. So we are very often not we don't work on endless timelines, because if you're sort of working on a project for like 10 years or 5 years or 7 years, and it's sort of a residence or a smaller project, then by the time, you sort of killed at least half a generation of relation with that, right? While it's growing at one level, there's one way to see it, that it's still growing for 7 years or 8 years or 10 years or whatever, but 20 years, however long you're making a house or a small, even a building, like even a museum. But you conceive of it then and there, and it needs to see the light of day within a few years. Even master plans in cities, they sort of turn around in that time. So you have to temper it for realization. Also, let's not forget that architecture is a lot more of a team expression than an individual expression. It may start, I mean, in a studio like mine, it may start with a sort of principal dialogue or a mentor's dialogue and all. And that's how this studio works. And if you ask them, they'll tell you that I don't sit and draw out things for anybody. I mean, it's very rare. And the ideas that come from me now are more conceptual and directional than detail oriented or sort of very specific. So it's more like a crit that you're getting than anything else. And of course, the first one is a sort of is a dialogue, but beyond, or a conceptual conversation. But like I said, I think often you have to realize that in music I can fumble, and I do that as well. I fumble in music, right? But I'm fumbling for myself, so I can stop. I can, shake my hand and start again. Can't fumble in architecture.
So they say perfection is sometimes it's said that perfection is the fear of making mistakes. Would you agree to that?
No, not at all. I think that might be perfection in execution, but perfection in conceptualization is not that, right? So I think there are two different ways to look at it. You can see, it's the same with musicians, right? You can see a guy play, and I think that's sometimes I've seen a couple of very famous Indian bands play, and I really admire them. I like them as people. I see them play, and I say, "What was that? Like you played it like the album, so there's no emotion in it because you played it mechanically." But then, and some of my idols do it. Like first time I saw Joe Satriani in London, he played, and I think that guy's a machine. Like how is he? I couldn't figure out how the sound from the fingers was, the fingers to the sound and whatnot. I was like, that's insane. But then when I saw him play in Bombay, he was just, he was playing the same set, but it was just a different level. When I saw Guns N' Roses, I saw them open the Discovery Center in Bhartiya City. They were insane there, but when they played in Gurgaon, they were better.
Really?
Right? So it's, and it's the same, I think, in architecture, right? You will see some of the greatest practices in the world doing work, which is seminal.
Yeah.
And it continues because you're sort of absorbing what you've done, you're deconstructing, but you need to keep running the practice. So a classic case is, Foster, you look at his repertoire, you'll see like one crazy, principally iconic project, and then you'll see it go to a point, and you'll see spin-offs of it elsewhere, and then you'll suddenly see another behemoth of a project. And that's just how you've conceptually developed it. That's research in architecture and research in design. And remember that both in music and in architecture, you need to repeat things. It's repetition that will make you get better at something. So I think very often, at least in this context in India, when I speak to people, they are really afraid of repeating ideas. And that's often because you've not spent enough time on a genuine idea. And once you've stumbled upon something, or you've created something which is good, you need to work to iron out the kinks and improve it.
This reminds me of something you had said to me a couple of days ago when we were chatting about what Peter Cook had said to you about consistency, right? And not, so what is the context for that? We're not expecting consistency all the time.
It's actually this time, right? And this is a classic example. When I speak to most people, we become hyper productive. We're super productive and super efficient.
A lot of people are saying that.
Yeah, and I really envy them. But I say, to me, this is I've never had a 2-month summer holiday since high school, and you have a 1-month summer holiday. You can sit in front and vegetate, and you need to do some basic hygiene. What's the need to be super productive? Do something that you haven't done. So yes, you will need to, because we're grown up and we're professionals and we have certain responsibilities to the outside world. So you have to do certain things, but do them differently. And Peter Cook, I think, I remember I think we struck up a lot of conversations when he was here.
Yeah.
Also because I'm the only kid, and his wife Yael told me that they have only one kid, and who's also a musician. And my first cousin's a musician, so I sort of.
So you kind of stuck a chord.
Yeah. And that's when he said, I think consistency and performance are overrated in architecture. Like, why does everything have to keep going up? And I could relate to it instantly because I felt that, because the first time we really showed our work out in public, it was instantly celebrated or recognized at whatever level. I also could relate to it as music, because you can't put yourself under this pressure to outdo yourself. Then it's just a game. And why are you doing it? So if you...
But some would just call that striving for perfection, right? At one level, you repeat and you're going to make your mistakes, you correct your mistakes, you keep improving on what you're doing. And that is, some would see that as challenging yourself and wanting to do better with every step.
I can't believe that you're striving for perfection every day of the year for your entire professional career.
Sure.
And your entire personal life. You can't. And anyone who says that is lying. Right? So, or it's just being pretentious. You can't. And if you're doing so, then where did you take the break to sort of turn back and say, where have I come? And this is like a perfect opportunity for all of us to just step back and say, where have we arrived after all this?
So if you're not doing that, if you're not working 24 hours a day in this lockdown and in the situation that all of us are in, what is it? Like you said that you would recommend that people take this time out to do the things that they haven't done or do things differently. What is it that you are doing in this time period? What's keeping you busy?
I'm letting my studio be. I'm letting them do what they want to do. Right? And I hope they're enjoying it. B,
you might be in for a lot of surprises at the end of this.
Yeah,
huh?
I'm getting some surprises on our
Already?
and good ones actually.
Oh, that's
Mostly
good.
Mostly good ones. And I think I'm writing a lot more.
Okay.
Something I stopped doing. I started reading again. I remember, like, at least in terms of theory and philosophy, I've never really needed to read too much because I get it all from the kind of music I was listening to. And so going right in here at 11 all through the night or whatever. So I think that's something that I'm doing. So, but yeah, just taking time. But I think even that has some level of doing something associated with it, right? And it sort of brings me to Renzo Piano's association of the plaza versus the piazza, right? So the American idea of the plaza and the Italian idea of the piazza, right?
Yeah.
It's meant to do nothing. It's a space which is meant for nothing. It's almost the only one thing I agree with Doshi on, this only one thing I agree with Doshi on is that you need to have space to do nothing. With just nothing at all.
So do you think space. You've commented earlier about the space between buildings? Do you think that could transform into spaces where you do nothing? Or is that what is happening and nothing is being done in those spaces, unfortunately?
No, I think it's a well understood thing, right? That the space in between buildings is where the city really happens. And the city also means its people. So it's not, there are only so many occupants within. So it's always about how does the building touch the sky? How does it touch the ground? How does it interact with the ground? And what it does around it. I feel that in India, we put even large projects put themselves in silos. You put a picket fence or a boundary wall and you say, oh, this is me. And there's nothing else outside. So I don't think that works. I think you have to not only program it, but also physically manifest it in a way where there is stuff happening between spaces, then you need to lose that boundary wall. That's because that's where the city occurs. That's where you'll find lit paths and shaded areas where people go and hang out and, or sort of occurrences, of the life of a city.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second because we're getting a couple of messages on Instagram for the Zoom ID and password. So my colleague Siddhant, who is handling the Zoom account, Siddhant, if you can just share the Zoom ID and password so that people can join the Zoom meeting from Instagram. Yeah. Sorry, Akshat.
That's okay.
Okay. Also wanted to ask you, you've kind of, you've had an interesting journey. You've traveled a lot. You've exposed yourself to various experiences that you've had, both in terms of music, in terms of architecture, in terms of design. Who or what are some of your memorable experiences through your travels? I can think of one. Where you went. Sorry?
I have that paper drawing here.
You know what? That drawing was made on your instructions, okay? So you can pull out the elevations and the mess I made on that. But one of the stories, since Akshat and I were having this chat a couple of days ago as well, which I found rather fascinating, was him having visited a very famous architect's house for a very specific purpose.
Yeah.
No comment on that.
I think when I was first traveling through Europe, and I'd bought a Eurail ticket, and
this is when you had gone for your internship.
Yes, and I'd taken a little over a fortnight out to see the places I wanted to see. Right, I had a list of about 300 odd buildings. I had 2 cameras. Like in those days, it was transparencies, like 35mm slide film in one and black and white film, and that's what you would do. And you basically just spend the entire day walking to eat like fries or a burger or whatever street food you could find, and chug on a Coke and not really drink any water, which I still don't. But I'd gotten into this habit of, I always thought, hey, it's what if human beings were like dogs and they could mark their territory wherever they would pee? So I would actually go and pee in in famous buildings. It was just to sort of do that. And I happened, and a few years ago, quite a few years ago, so not in that trip, I was invited for a dinner in Basel, and it just so happened to be next to Pierre de Meuron's house. And Pierre had actually made that house it was exposed concrete with all the right marks, with perfect concrete cuboid, right? And with enough transparency at the ground level, so you would see the chaiselon, and you saw the Marcel Breuers and whatnot. It was like you walked into a Wheat Sherman Miller showroom that lived in, the USM furniture and the USM cabinets and what. It was the works, right, for Swiss German house. And so I just asked. I asked my host, who actually was living in a very traditional looking building. He was a mansion, but traditional mansion. He was a real estate baron. So I said, that I like that. And whose house is that? So then he told me that it's Pierre de Meuron's house. He said, he made it for somebody, and it was leaking. So the client left in 3 years, and he gave the building to, and Pierre bought it, right?
Okay.
So I said, well, great. So I said, so he's just moving in. He said, no, he's just moving out. So what do you mean he's just moving out? You said he just bought it. So no, he bought it 10 years ago. It still leaks. He hasn't been able to fix the leaks. So he's bought himself another house and he's moving there. And
even Herzog de Meuron make mistakes in their houses. Just note to self, guys. It's okay if a bathroom leaks.
Listen, when we were there, when Namit and I were in England, there was the Westminster.
No. But you have to come back to that house. You haven't finished the story yet.
I have. I mean, I did obviously go there, and then I did pee in the house, and I want to use his pissoir, and I did go there, and I did use his washroom. Of course, no one was there.
So you marked your territory in de Meuron's house.
I can name the buildings. I could at one time. I can't remember any longer.
Where else you marked your territory?
Yeah, well, the Villa Savoie.
Oh, nice. Nicely done.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm going to regret asking any more questions on this. Continue.
I don't know where I was now after that. But I think look. Sorry, I've lost my chain of thought.
Okay.
I don't know what I was talking about.
Well, we'll come back to that. I also wanted to ask you how important do you think, or how do you regard success? How important do you think that is for you, and what kind of success do you think you've achieved so far?
I think success has to be in your own terms, and everyone has to. I mean, at least I believe everyone has to define their own terms of it.
Of course.
And like any target for an individual, I think that target is a moving target. So for me, I don't believe I'm successful at all. I can today turn around and say I have a successful collection of guitars, but I can't say I'm a successful architect. Because that's still something that's changing or evolving. As it's a dynamic concept, just as sustainability is a dynamic concept. So success, I believe, is a dynamic concept. But I can definitely look back and say I'm happy about more things than I'm unhappy about.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's success. But I wouldn't put a number to it or a figure to it or a sort of definite target to it. Like I wouldn't. Yeah, of course, if you win an Aga Khan or a Pritzer or something, it is you know what it is. I mean,
are those your aspirations?
Yeah, of course. I mean, as an architect, why not? Like that is what it would be for sure. And to at least be in the race, to say, well, you're in the race and you sort of lost it by even if you're like the underdog in it. with that, like I think when we got the two JKs, I was very happy because I was 33. I just come out of that stroke, and to then go to to get, and we had just started revealing our work to the country, and to get that like instantly out. I think that was a special moment for me, and also because when it was announced, I was in Germany and I was working on the India Pavilion. So I was working out of somebody else's office, and and I just got this message, or I got a call and say, hey, you won this, and I was like, whoa, that's big, because to me, when I was studying in architecture school, that was the only, it was the oldest, biggest award. So it had a nostalgic value, and like I know that Ashok Lal had got one, and I think Viren got one as well for something, and so all the guys we respected had one, so you had to have one, and I had two, so that was cool.
So you get a place on the big people's table.
Yeah. Manit got one, I think I remember as well. And Manit got one or two, and then, so yeah, that I think that was like, oh, you've grown up. You're not a Barsati practice anymore.
Well, clearly not. We can see sprawling lawns behind you. So Barsati definitely is.
Because we could make a building there. We wanted to.
Only reason.
And nobody wants to build there anymore. That's why. Yeah.
Anymore.
No, I think I feel happy when I come here. It's a pleasant. It's an enviable place to work out of. If you're in a city like Delhi, this is it's a very nice place. I can invite. It's an open invitation for anyone, whoever wants to come. Just like drop a mail or a call or something, and come over for a coffee. We have very good coffee, and we have nice green trees.
Careful what you offer. We've got, I think, more than 200 people who are watching this talk right now.
It's really shit.
Yeah. So, guys, if you want to visit Akshat's office, please contact him directly. Okay.
Then it's a rave. We can do a rave.
Well, you should be stretching for an hour and a half before that, so that you can perform then for everyone.
Yeah, that I think I'm sort of getting ready to that. I'm getting to that point.
Do you feel like you want to perform again in front of an? I'm sorry, I'm actually going to stop here for a second because we've lost our Instagram feed, and I'm going to start it again. So guys on Zoom, if you can just give me a second. Akshat, I'm going to invite you back on Insta. Yeah.
I don't know how to do that. So do I just click? No.
Did you know, can you see that we've gone live?
Yes, and I've got it.
So just open that story, and I'm going to invite you. Architecture discipline, right? Yeah. Guys on Instagram, we just lost the feed because I think we've crossed an hour's mark, but we're back. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you getting the feed on Instagram?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
So should we? Okay. I don't have to do anything, right?
You don't have to do anything at all. Okay. Should we take a couple of questions and then we can kind of continue the conversation? Because I think we're getting a lot of comments and things. If anybody has any questions, they can just send it. On Zoom, you can just send a message to us, and I'll pick up some of the questions from there. Unfortunately, on Instagram, because the video quit, so if you've asked any questions on Insta, I can't access them anymore. So please, so on Instagram, if anyone has questions, please, there's a little square at the bottom of your screen with a question mark on it. If you click it and just send in your questions, I can pick them up from there. Or if you'd like to join the Zoom call, you can do that as well. And people on Zoom, just type in your questions and send it as a message, and we'll pick them up from there. Yeah.
Mrinalini,
yes.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
There, I can't miss it. So the question to Akshat.
Viren, can you speak up a little bit so that our friends on Instagram can hear you?
Is this loud enough?
I'll repeat it anyway. So why don't you proceed?
Okay. So my question is to Akshat. He got highly stimulated from his childhood till date by the music of the West. Say I call it the West. It could be, of course, if you break it up, it could be. I'm putting it under one umbrella. Say the West. Certainly, it has to do with his age. that he was young, and young people can be drawn towards things that are more exciting, more challenging, and can find also the way, like he rightly said, a catharsis. No, finding your own voice is easier to when you relate to the Western music. Do you feel, Akshat, that uh, your affinity towards the European architecture, or the paradigm that is very strong, which you said is partly also stimulated by Coop Himmelblau and all the four high-tech architects? Do you think this affinity has to do with your affinity towards music, and that you slide almost naturally, organically into your architecture, and you don't say, while, and that's very interesting to note and share maybe with the audience, while all your gurus or the teachers at TVB schools were trying to orient themselves towards architecture or architectural interpretation of Indian modernism, and how do you take it further? How do you interpret in today's context Indian architecture and find your own voice? You rather chose to go the other way. Any narrative or any anecdote that led to it?
Um,
Yeah, Mrinalini, this is it.
Okay. Why don't
You
you?
have to, maybe Akshat can, through the answer only,
Yeah.
get the
I
question.
think so. Yes, I think what was the Indian music available to us at the time? It was, there used to be a program called Chitrahar
Chitrahar. Yeah.
that used to come right after Krishi Darshan.
Wednesdays and Fridays.
Yeah, so that's the sort of music, the sort of Indian cinema music. Some of which was nice, some of which still is nice, but the production value was, and then there was classical music, most of which was sort of these gharanas, and it was kind of mummified in a way. That was it was there weren't too many people who you could see, relate to, aspire to be, or to be like, or to sort of learn from. So I think at that age, there was still Ravi Shankar, uh, Zakir Hussain, Allah Rakha, and I would listen to that music. I still do, but it's not. Most of that was instrumental and not vocal music, right? So and you can't. It's very hard to listen to 3 hours of of instrumental music over and over again unless something's captivating you. That the move towards, and I know that, like, the move or the affinity for, or that I was drawn towards a certain kind of architecture which was more put together like a Meccano, was definitely because of my understanding of music. It was because I was always pushing the boundaries on the fretboard and on my amps and whatnot, which most gravity-based architecture did not have at the time. Right? Most architecture using as a certain kind of material palette and whatnot. Neither were we talking about in traditional architecture extremely large spans, public spaces of a certain nature. I mean, I had like the zongs in Bhutan, or we'd done case studies, and I'd spent a lot of time in the mountains and in organic settlements, because that you would do it at TVB. So you would appreciate certain formal resolutions, certain ways of planning space, and how you would experience space, and how people could live. But most of it was for simpler programs and simpler needs. It wasn't for complex programs and complex needs. Actually, that was a debate in my head. It was a ravaging debate, which is why my undergraduate thesis was about that subject. So I had studied Gandhi's philosophy, E.F. Schumacher's philosophy, um, the Theory of Evolution by Darwin, and then I'd studied Buckminster Fuller and a couple of other guys. And I think what I found was that at that time, people like Renzo Piano, Peter Salter, Marquis were doing things that were and also, of course, were doing things that were extremely progressive in their expression, in their technique, uh, and they were not yet the architecture was contemporary and high modern. It fit in. I realized that your tools and technology will change. Like, let's not forget, brick is a kind of technology as well. But what doesn't change is the need for inspiring techniques. It's not like Indian materials and Indian techniques don't inspire us. I mean, actually, I think I take pride in the fact that we use very simple materials in our work, but our work is not, and it is, and a lot of our work is simplistic, but the technique with which we do it is, I think, is fairly sophisticated. And that's a learning that comes from the West, because I haven't found, or I hadn't found, that refinement in in uh, in in vernacular or traditional Indian architecture. The demand levels or the performance levels were not that high. That isn't to say that there is no emotion in the work. There's a lot of emotion in Indian architecture, in traditional buildings as well. It's the same with music, and it's also the same in Western and music as well. So you can hear a band like Coldplay, which is really zero technique, or U2 for that matter. It's like very simplistic. Like, if you really look at the tabulature for U2 music, it's nothing. It's only mostly effects. But there is this little gliss or this ephemeral quality that sort of engages you and entices you. Is the same with when you hear, say, Hari Prasad Chaurasia play. It has that feel, and then he's sort of going off into these crazy tangents. But I think for the kind of building programs that excited me, there was no other. There was no other parallel. Now we can, and I think that the conversation that we were having was always in English language. Also, the techniques of learning were very Western, so we weren't learning Indian techniques of composition and whatnot. I believe, try and very strongly layer our materials, our identity, our own narrative in our work, in our architectural work, and a lot of our interior work as well. But I don't think there were very few people who could sort of take that to another level with us in college. I mean, Ashish Ganju was one such. Ashok Lal was another such.
Akshat, you need to speak up. People on Instagram can't hear you anymore.
All right. Can you guys hear me now? Room's audible, Insta isn't. What does that mean?
Zoom. I think Zoom is audible, Insta isn't. So you need to probably just get closer to your device.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, I think that's a debate that lives on, at least in my head. And I think it will continue to live on till I'm done with whatever I'm doing. It is your identity versus what you have to do. And I think that's an identity that everyone has to struggle. I'm getting that again.
I think is your connection to Instagram okay? Because it's getting hung.
Okay, wait, let's see. Oh, phone needs to cool down before you can use it. Sorry, guys, hang on.
Okay, a short break for Instagram. Just
hang on.
Akshat's phone has gotten too hot.
I go on my iPad.
Okay, we're just switching devices.
So I don't know how to do this now. You have to invite me again.
Just sign in.
I'm done. You're signed in.
Okay, I'm going to invite you again.
Hello?
1 second. I don't see you here.
You don't?
Are you watching the live video?
Yeah, I got the invite from you.
Okay.
No?
Sorry guys, just a second. Okay, there you are. I've added you on Insta Live again.
Mm-hmm.
There. I hope that's better. Can someone just respond on Instagram to tell us whether you can hear us? Akshat, if you just say a couple of things so that they can...
Okay, guys, hello, back again.
Yeah.
Hopefully the iPad will not heat up too much. Okay, Fairy, thank you. Akshat's not there yet. I am right here, Ashmit. Don't lie.
Interestingly, Ashmit's on both Insta and Zoom.
Why he wants to be? He wants to be everywhere all the time. I have some choices to abuse and a few other things.
Save that for later, please. Akshat, I want to ask you about your obsession with the monochromatic palette.
Okay.
Why? How did that start?
I think it's
why does it continue?
Oh, you mean black? Is that what you're saying?
I'm losing. Okay, you're back. Yeah, you have mentioned in the past that you kind of, even when you're designing, even with your architecture, you design in monochrome, and that's how you think. And is that a reflection of how you project yourself as well?
No, may I interrupt there, Mrinalini?
Yes, very.
It was, in fact, the other way. I may rephrase this question.
So I was
the question could be, Mrinalini, the question could be, while Akshat is wearing mostly black as we know him, I mean, earlier he had orange trousers.
I still have those trousers.
You still have those ones, yes. But nearly everything was black. And that's my question to him, while his architecture and especially the interiors have a incredible selection of colors. I've seen his Neel Sutra, which was done in the lower ground next to the pool in the Oberois in Gurgaon. It's a fabulous interior. It's one of the most beautiful interiors I have experienced in India in the contemporary realm. And I feel he's very skillfully using colors. And my question, therefore, would be linked, and unlike Mrinalini, what you observed, would be linked, where does this come from, this skill of using such beautiful colors and curating them, orchestrating them in a very harmonious way. I've seen many AD publications. Many of the interiors actually come together because of the expensive material that have been used, have been showcased, less of the way the colors or shapes have been orchestrated. In his case, I see always that he's able to compose them and bring them nicely together. Where does this come? Because I also don't know. It's only recently that I've seen and following his recent interior works, which are very colorful.
So just to add to that, I hope everyone on Instagram heard that. Basically, what Viren is saying is that although Akshat projects himself to be very monochromatic, but his work, especially his interior works, have a lot of color in it. The reason I said it the other way around is because Akshat and I were having this conversation a couple of days ago. And a statement that was made at that point was how when they're designing, they're thinking monochromatic, they're thinking of a monochromatic panel. They design in black and white is what Akshat had said. And then color comes as a much later component of the process. It's interesting how I see it that, and this, so my opinion could be clouded by the conversation that Akshat and I had, but a lot of your work is still very monochromatic, but the colors are used as accents and they form like these pops of moments within the work. Mm-hmm. So if you'd like to comment on that. A lot of, especially your recent work, the Jodhpur project, was completely.
One color.
Sorry.
Monochromatic.
Also one color. It's a teal. It's a teal.
It's a teal, yeah. But over here, especially with Jodhpur, it's still one color, but there is that very vibrant color that has been used. So there is that distinction between what you project for yourself versus the work that you're doing.
So, okay, so just to get the black out of the way, I'm not projecting anything. I used to be, I think I offended a couple of serious senior IAS officers with offensive t-shirts early on in my days. And people who knew me got complaints that, so-and-so can't, doesn't know how to sort of, how to dress for a formal occasion. Or for a serious meeting, but it was. And remember, like when you get out of architecture school, you tend to think you tend to be a certain way, and a little, you're not so well. You don't consider what you dress as carefully. I would always dress properly, but I didn't think that someone would take offense to a t-shirt, to a colorful t-shirt per se. So I started wearing black because you could just wear a black t-shirt and jeans, go to site, be in your studio, do a meeting, throw on a jacket, and go for a proper meeting, with the client or with somebody. So you could basically just wear that same attire from morning to night, and it wouldn't really get dirty, right? All you had to do was deal with the heat, which I can take the heat, so it didn't matter.
So it was convenient.
Soon, it was convenience, and I think soon after I realized that when I wear any other color, I can see myself in my peripherals, right? So if you're wearing a white shirt or a colorful shirt, you can see it here. At the moment, my physicality kind of disappears. I realized much later, after people started making observations on me, that I pop out because I'm wearing black. But by then it had just become a habit already, and I was too invested in the habit financially and intellectually to change it. The pop of color in the work is actually very similar to the pop of I want to be happy. I want to make happy spaces. I don't want to make somber and dark spaces. And even when we use black, or when I use black, there's even at home, there's a lot of black at home. Like my entire floor at home is black, but we have a timber floor and we have a white ceiling, and there's a lot of art on the wall, and the furniture is colorful. So those things pop out. But what happens with black on vertical surfaces, that shadows disappear, right? Whereas on a white wall with and I've always sort of given people that analogy that white with no light on it as gray is really sort of is really sort of not a very refined experience. It's not a positive experience. So I think so what the black allows us to do is it allows us to sort of almost focus a person's view on what they want to, on what you want them to see. The color, the use of color, I think, I'm post-rationalizing this, and I know what Viren is saying because, and remember, Viren, I think you should remember that we discovered the power of black in an interior when we were doing the Triveni office in Noida in 2003 or 2004. How black transforms glass, right? So you paint a wall black, and then suddenly it becomes a mirror, and it's not really a mirror, but it's a lot more reflective. But the color was pointed out to me a few years ago by a filmmaker who I really respect, and he said, Akshat, your use of color, and I didn't even realize it. I didn't realize that I was using color in that way. I think if I have to post-rationalize, I think it comes from the need to create, like when I saw the Baraya airport by Richard Rogers, or even the Centre Pompidou, these buildings could just as well have been monochromatic, but there was the pop of color does something. If you take that color away, and I can equate it to, say, the music of Van Halen, which is my biggest influence, right? Eddie Van Halen is. So there's always this chugging door rhythm, and then suddenly there's this flash of like stupendous skill. And even when you're doing that, there is a loose rhythm which is low, and then there are these intermittent highs that sort of just sort of pop out. And and that comes naturally. I don't know why it does. I don't know where it comes from, but there have been times when we've tried to sort of move away from it. Like there's a project we did for Trump, which kind of completely moves away because I just wanted to do a very refined, silent space. We've also done an office recently for Mr. Oberoi, where it's the same thing, where it's a very silent palette, but yeah, there are still accents. So I think it's more, yes, the color, and color does bring joy. It does, sort of get you, and so much so that recently someone pointed out that most of our website or most of our buildings are red somewhere. I think red just came from the Park de la Ville, right? It's like the longest wavelength. You'll see it no matter where you see it. It'll pop out at you. And it started with the Discovery Center because it was a building in the middle of nowhere. So how do you get people to see it? If you don't go high, and we couldn't go high. So the big red egg would have been visible through the green. It would have been contrasting with the green. So the pop color to me is almost a monochrome. I mean, it is almost like a pure monochromatic statement in itself, the solid colors. And somehow we managed to get on with purples and then more primary colors. And it seems to have become inherent in the way we compose things after a point. So it's definitely not there when we're planning something. It's not an exit route, so very often you will use an accent wall. We've never done an accent wall. It's always a way to, it's not a way to distract your eye, but it's a way to attract your eye more towards something. The Discovery Center, the program that we had been given, also internal program, it came through a lot of experience through some very heavyweight real estate consultants abroad. It came to a point where, where the function of the auditorium was necessitated in the middle of the building, but we wanted it up in front. So sort of putting it in red also wasn't just an external sort of attraction. It also sort of gave it importance on the inside of the building. But like I think there is a fundamental need in me to create spaces that are happy and not somber, whereas the architecture has to be solid and often somber. That struggle for heavy versus light, the contrast in composition, the contrast in thought, the contrast in sort of balancing that dialectic exists in my life, and it exists in our work. And I think, and the color is a reflection of that.
And what about yourself?
Personally, I also really like. Personally, I really like. I like Anthrax and Megadeth, but I also enjoy listening to Spice Girls. In my mind, I wish I could compose a Spice Girls song.
Really? So when we have that rave at your studio, we know what to expect now.
It'll be Spice Girls on acid.
So, but interestingly, there's obviously a sense of discipline in what you do, in how you work, in the way you behave. There's a very distinct sort of like you stand up straight, right?
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, not literally, but
Okay.
Any mistakes that you've made that you think have been significant in your journey?
Yeah, I think we all make mistakes. I mean, you make mistakes in your personal life, you make mistakes in your professional life, you make mistakes with your own self. Not continuing to practice 20 hours a day was a mistake. Having 2 cups of coffee on first thing in the morning on an empty stomach with a throbbing artery was a mistake. Not looking where I'm driving was a mistake. Yeah, enough and more. Buying 70 guitars was a mistake.
You think?
Yeah, of course. Just there's actually there's so many things that Ashok says that I can relate to. Right, architecture discipline was a practice that I was trying very hard not to start.
Why is that?
Architecture discipline, the practice, I don't want that responsibility on myself. Right, it is a tremendous responsibility when you have people who look up to you and whose happiness and livelihood you're responsible for. Also,
so why did you do it then?
I don't know. I mean that it's a long story. I think I felt compelled to do it, which is at that time, which is why I did it. And I'm not saying I regret it, but I'm saying that there are, you always see these things. Like I would have probably regretted not having started it as well. I'm happy. So
but you've always been the person who wants to do your own thing, right? Like you started DMonk the minute you got out of college. So
I didn't start DMonk. It was Manav and I who started DMonk.
Yeah. So when you guys started it, but then you were very conscious of the idea that you wanted to have your own setup and you wanted to do things the way you wanted to do them.
No. I really not. I mean, in my mind, no. I really just want to be instructed by someone to do something, and I'm happy doing that. Like, just someone says, draw this, make this drawing, and I'll make it. I'm just very happy. But yes, there is this critical thinker in me, unfortunately, that would then never do it just the way it's meant to be done. And so I like to innovate. I like to improvise, and that maybe, I don't know where it comes from. I like to innovate. I've always been a tinkerer. So no matter what I do, I will tinker, even if it's a drawing or whatever. It's a tinker. Mrinalini, you're getting some messages saying you can't be heard, by the way.
I can't be heard.
Right. Yeah. Someone
I think that's
saying...
an earlier message.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Right.
So we're both audible now?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
For me, you
On
are.
both sides. Okay.
Okay, good.
I've always been a tinkerer. I've always just sort of taken things apart. So if you give me if I would be given a toy, I would not ever use the toy for what it was beyond a couple of hours or a couple of days. And right after, it would be pulled apart and made something else of, right? I mean, I've blown up telephones by plugging them into power sockets. I've electrocuted myself a few times. I've sort of put LEDs from like flash guns into, I mean, those pistols, right? Kids' pistols into power sockets, and that's the one and had like minor explosions. I remember one time I put, in a planter, I put this firecracker that actually brought down, like, my mom came out shouting because she said, I heard glass shattering after Diwali, one day after Diwali. And I thought I'd broken the neighbor's windows. And suddenly I hear my mom coming up, screaming, what just happened? And I'd actually shattered all the windows in the house. So, so it's, I don't think it's the need for perfection. It's maybe the need to destroy that sort of makes it that way. Or this sort of bumbling, fumbling idiot that sort of makes you do things a certain way. No, to be honest, I don't think there was an equal opportunities firm in India at the time when we were doing this. And I think Matra had taken its toll on me, not in a bad way, but because when we started, we were in one small apartment in Sheikh Sarai. Or when I started with Matra, we were in one small apartment in Sheikh Sarai, and we had gone through hell with a couple of projects where I think both of us in our own individual capacities were heavily invested. There was a project, there was a resort project, and then there was another project. That was my first project that I was doing. I don't know how, and sort of Viren had left me alone at the time to do it. And I was young. I was just 3 months graduated from college, or maybe 5 months graduated from college, and I was doing it. And I still look at those drawings, and I've lost the drawing set, by the way. But because they were on tracings, and you would, those were days would print on tracing and then take blueprints of those days. But I think and then from going from there into, what the current studio is, at least half of what the current studio is, and going through a certain iteration of works, and, it wasn't easy doing architecture at the time. It wasn't easy for him. I know that it wasn't easy for me either. And I think there were, and you do need to sort of sometimes reinvent the studio. I mean, that's what we're doing at Architecture Discipline these days. So it sort of became this need. I mean, I felt I was feeling a void at the time when I started.
And where do you think it's headed now?
No idea.
None?
More vacation, I hope. Another month of vacation. I want my 2.5 months of holidays.
You wanted a full summer worth of vacation.
Yeah. I would like, I hope it's headed to a place where I turn 17 again, maybe 22 again. So, yeah, that's where I would want it to be.
How would you do things differently? If you could start again, how would you do it differently?
I would exercise more. I would make it a habit to play the guitar 1.5 hours a day, no matter what. I would not drink coffee, and I would read more, and I definitely I definitely always have one research section in the studio. We have that now, but I would definitely always have one small group of people dedicated for research in the studio that was never to be distracted by anything else, come what may.
Okay. Besides music, and which has obviously been a great influence on you, your work, the way you put things together, just the way you are. But besides music, is there something else that you feel has been a strong influence or has informed your journey?
I think everything. I mean, travel changes you. Travel experience, exposure changes you. Your friends change you. I have some. I'm very proud of the friends I have. Some are. A lot of them are much older than I am. The people I've met, like people in interactions with people, some clients, change you. They influence you in many ways. So I think, but yeah, big influences would probably be music, architecture for sure. I mean, there's no way. I mean, that's what I've been living and breathing for the last, since 23 years now, 23 years. So that's a lot. Like that's more than 50% of my life and that's your conscious life, right? So seriously reading up and sort of practicing architecture. The people around me, like the young, it's insane when I come into the studio and sometimes it's someone's birthday and I say, hey, when were you born? And they say 97. And I'm, wow, how, or whatever. You just suddenly feel old. I think the realization that I'm now 40, it affects me and influences me in many ways now, influences many decisions. So yeah.
Are you a quick decision maker?
Oh, super quick decision. I mean, I can get stuck, but I joke about this with Arvind, from Kriya. I said, you're paralyzed. And he pointed that out. I don't realize a lot of things about myself. He said, you're a very quick decision maker. And I realized that I am. Like, I will take a punt. I will take a punt and I will stand by it, whether it be it design, be it work. If I commit, I will commit, or I'll make sure we are committed and we will make sure it's done.
Is that the performer in you who kind of enables that, where you just get on stage and you start playing and you might have mistakes, you might falter, but you have to kind of plow through. You can't stop and think and analyze and, go back and start from scratch. You just have to carry on.
Well, yeah, of course. Look, you have to do things to do things. And when you do things, you will make mistakes. It's about how you plow through those mistakes, how you stand by them, what you make of them, right? So if you take it, because I'm tired of taking musical analogies, but if you do the biggest things, the greatest solos, the greatest moments in music are mistakes, right? And the greatest moments and greatest things are born out of limitations, right? Like Malmsteen was playing 50-watt Marshall combos, and that's when he invented his sound. And, it was, rock and roll was invented because someone was couldn't record without, was recording and the speaker cone was torn. So, the Kinks, that's how You Really Got Me came about. That's how it happens in our design work as well, right? You'll stumble upon patterns, techniques, and things while you're trying to do something, but you have to be trying to do them intensely enough. If you're not doing them, if you're playing to a formula, if you're basically going to be cutting and pasting something that somebody else has done or that you've done before every time over, or even if you're cutting and pasting what you've done before, if you're not trying to improvise, if you're not trying to get something out of it or get somewhere with it, and you're not involved enough with it, you'll never realize.
We have a question related to this. Maybe we can have Ritima pose the question herself, if Ritima is on Zoom with us. Hi, Ritima, you can just unmute yourself and ask your question if you're still there.
Hi, Mrinalini, how are you?
Good.
Hi, Akshat.
Hi.
Okay, so I think I got disconnected. My question earlier was, can you share some specific notes about how music has translated into your work?
Okay.
So it could, in terms of color or material or composition or anything.
I'm happy to, and if you're not happy with my answer, I will reveal your pet name, which is even more embarrassing than Mrinalini's.
No, Akshat.
I'll do that by now. Thanks a lot, Akshat.
Revenge is in the mail, Akshat.
Just for the benefit of the Instagram audience, I'm just going to repeat Vitima's question in case you didn't catch that. She's asking Akshat to share a few specific examples of how his relationship with music translates or has translated into his work.
So, this is something that I'm asked often, and I think everyone expects some cute cerebral answer. I don't think. So while at one level there is this huge debate that's going on, students come to me for it as well. How is architecture frozen music, and of course there can be analogies to everything. Any structure can be analogous to any other structure. So architecture can be a frozen language. Architecture can be a frozen painting. It could be something more cerebral. It could be dialectic thought and whatnot. But I think and there was definitely a time where I would translate my understanding of modes and scales into proportioning systems. But these are all tools and techniques that you're using while you're trying to sort of build an understanding of certain things for yourself. But when it goes beyond that, when it becomes a lot more inherent and cerebral, it's kind of like a stroke. It's like a stroke. It's like you're painting or you're drawing with a charcoal pencil or a fat sketch pencil. It's more inherent. And I think in this conversation I mentioned a few, like the chugging of the low end chugging of Van Halen's music. So there's always a low end and then there's intermittent highs. You're always your mind sort of conditioning it. So I'm sort of pacing myself in that manner. And I think when I'm done with a project, or when I'm done with the first sketch of a project, I can draw an analogy, but that analogy is no longer about scale and proportions or sort of movement and rhythm and so on and so forth. It's more about the inherent understanding of what music has made me as a person, and how the need to express myself will eventually come out on the drawing board when I'm sitting on the drawing board. But a lot of what we do in architecture discipline is cerebral. A lot happens through verbal instructions and not through drawn instructions. Actually, I find it very hard, or non-drawn communication, right? So I'm not just going to say verbal. You communicate in many other ways, and like they say, 90% of communication is non-verbal, right? So we have that in the studio, and so it's the value system, and the value system is formed from the ideological understanding I've had of musical things, of what I've understood from lyrics and words and philosophical albums, or the way someone has put something together, or way how, or what some musicians are trying to say, more than eventually proportioning systems and expression techniques. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, you know what's coming.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions on Instagram. One of which says, just a second. I would love to get Akshat's views on the concept of habitat, the affinity we develop for spaces. Is it something we are conditioning ourselves, or it's something more primal and embedded in our... And sorry, the question kind of trails off.
It's a very complicated question.
Yes.
Virena told me not to go into hyperbole, so I'm not going to hyperbole.
Okay, so there's another one. What's your favorite book? Can you discuss with your ideas and thoughts, then you make it a new way through it? I'm not sure what this means, but do you want to answer what your favorite book is?
1984 by George Orwell.
Okay.
And look at where we're standing today.
Oh, wow. We also have Ankit Tomar, who is with us on Zoom. Can you please... I'd ask you to just speak a little bit so our Instagram audience can catch that.
Yeah. Hi, Akshat. Ankit this side. So
Hi, Ankit.
So my question was, what have been your inspiration when it comes to composing music, or even if you write songs? I mean, is it more influenced by the socio-political views that you possess, or is it like, just like you said, that you hear Spice Girls and you're like, I want to do it? So like, how does it hit you with the compositions and all the songwriting?
I think when you're younger and you're sort of maybe more nascent in any one discipline or both disciplines, you tend to have more literal sort of translations. So I've done this and I've done that, or I do this and it comes like so. To me, playing the guitar is a cathartic experience, right? So I steer away from the word music, because I don't think I play music. I play the guitar, right? And that sound moves me. It moves my physicality, right? So I have to, for example, stand up and play. I have to put a strap around myself. That I have to have a giant amplifier in front of me. It cannot be through headphones. I hate it. It can't be through a tiny little amplifier. It has to be a 4x12 or at least a 2x12 speaker that's sort of playing at least 70 decibels, if not more. I mean, usually it's crossing 100 something decibels when I'm playing. So it's not that you will be playing something and you'll suddenly say, I can compose with this. No, that's just what I'm doing to relax myself, to just sort of disconnect from everything else. And then what comes out is a whole different thing. The socio-political angle of it is a value system, right? What do I believe is the right thing for us to do? What do I believe is the right? So when Viren asked me about Indian architecture or something else, we're doing what we're doing because I believe that you need to reduce your material consumption. I believe in progress, right? I believe that if we can fly in an airplane and go from 50 degrees on a tarmac to minus some insane number of minus some insane temperature, then why is it that we need to, and that's happening only through that, through a few 100 millimeters, about 150 millimeters, why do we need to build 600 millimeters worth of things? Because that's, then you're taking more space and you're using a lot more material. I know that there's a whole different conversation that spins off in terms of what is high embodied energy and imbibed energy and what it takes to sort of, that's a different conversation, but the expression is an expression of progress, right? So would you still speak the same language that you were speaking in the 1800s? You wouldn't. Would you still write the same way? Do we still write letters to each other on pieces of paper? We don't. Was there something wrong with it? No, there was nothing wrong with it. But we're now just sending out emails, and now we're sending out messages. And if we were to have had this conversation even a few years ago, we would have been sitting across the table from each other. But today we're in front of screens. All of this informs, all these experiences inform what you do and how you become. To me, playing the guitar is a window to another world, or a window out of this world. It's not, I'm not doing it for any sort of spin-off benefits. It was never done as that. And that's why it's not even there is zero level of commercial interest on it. I mean, by commercial, I also mean investment in myself, right? There's zero level of that for me. If you today say, sell me a guitar, you will not get it. If you say, what happens to your guitars after you? Nobody gets them, right? But if I like you, and if I love you, and if you're worthy, if I feel you're worthy, you don't have to be worthy, and I'm not always right, you get one from me, and people have just got them from me because I felt they deserve it, more than me. And so there are, there's a relationship you form with these things, and that could be, you could form a relationship with some objects and you could not form a relationship with some objects. There are some guitars that have songs in them, some don't have songs in them, some are just sort of just masterpieces of craftsmanship, but they need to be kept in a case. I think the same applies for architecture. Like there is some emotion in architecture, and so there is always this rollicking debate about, whether it has to be, whether it's an art form or a science. I think it's both. But even in the highest levels of physics, there is a hypothesis and there is a sort of poetic understanding of what the universe is, and let's not forget that most modern science is based on the assumption of a miracle, which is the Big Bang, right? So it is someone's great sort of post-rationalized philosophy that we're still sort of following. Even Charles Darwin said that if so many things have happened, then it is possible, then it is probable that we have evolved this way. It is the most cohesive theory we have. It is not a proven fact.
Yeah. Coming back to your guitars, you said that this is for the benefit of everybody over here. If you want a guitar, it better be nice to Akshat. I'm only gunning for the stationery, okay? I can't play the guitar. But have you ever sold one? Any of yours?
I sold a few, yeah.
A few?
I sold two.
How? Wasn't it heartbreaking?
Look, at that time you have like limited pocket money or limited earnings, and then you have a trade-off. So I had this Yamaha that wasn't working, which was the played guitar that I would carry around with myself all the time. And I sold it for 24,000 rupees at that time in maybe 97, 98 to buy a Marshall amplifier, right? Because there is guitar players are conservative, and by the way, guitar players have something called GAS, right? It's called gear acquisition syndrome, right? You want more and more gear. So I wanted an amplifier. I sold this guitar to buy the amp, and a few years later, I regretted it because it was an absolutely unique thing, right? You never know when you'll get it back or not, and so I chased people for 20 years. I think I finally found it in 2017.
The same
on
piece.
YouTube, the same piece, right? And the same piece, it had made its way to Germany, and I wrote to the guy. I told him, I had a short conversation with him. He first ignored me, thought I was mad, and I wrote to him on Facebook, and then he discovered, well, he figured that I'm not kidding, so he charged me a bomb for it. I think he was testing me, and he didn't think I would say yes, and I said yes. So he couldn't back out, and he asked me to send him a case, and it was shipped to my friend's house in Switzerland, which my poor friend has to suffer all my most of my guitar shipments from across the world.
Your indulgences.
My indulgences. And when I got there, and there was a note in the case from the guy. He said, "Look, I really cleaned you out on the guitar, but seeing what you told me, and seeing your what your Facebook profile and reading a little bit about you, I figured you're into certain things and you might like this." So he actually had put in CDs that were unreleased records, unreleased copies of some Dream Theater recordings. Some James Labrie, who's the vocalist of Dream Theater, is one of my favorite bands. So they were like unreleased CD copies of that stuff, which was like all ready and like sort of demos and whatnot. He said, I used to record James Labrie. He actually also said that this particular guitar has been on these songs, so you might want to hear them.
So these are all original recordings.
Yeah.
And you have them with you now.
I have them with me. Yeah.
So it's a little similar to the sketch that you acquired, Corbusier sketch.
Yeah, that was also something, right? You end up looking for lights. I end up in a small village in Switzerland, which is actually where my friend lives, and I saw his dining table light. I said I want it, and it's an elegant, super high-end piece of engineering. I went looking for it, and I went to the shop, and the guy for a while was just like absolutely dismissive of me, because I couldn't speak a word of Swiss German, and he was irritated. He had a sling around his arm. He'd broken his right hand. And finally, he, had a friend with me. She was translating, and I kept asking him a question about certain fixtures, which were obviously iconic pieces, and he wasn't normal to answer. Then he finally said, "Where is this guy from?" And she said, "He's from India." The moment he heard that, he said, "Have you heard of Chandigarh?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you know who Le Corbusier is?" I said, She said, so my answer was, "I'm an architect, of course." And he said, come here. And he took me to this one corner in his shop, which was, like a little corner with some Corbusier memorabilia. And it turns out, and of course, the building was quaint. I could never get it. It felt very 70s, like 60s German silo, painted a certain tint of green and whatnot. But turns out that he said his grandfather was working in Corbusier's atelier, and he had the initial drafts for Chandigarh started from that very building, from that very space, and that was some memorabilia, and he gave me some. And of course, the building was drafted by his grandfather, and he was helped by Corbusier to do so. Don't forget the Swiss currency actually has Corbusier on it, so the most famous architect in the world. Yeah,
it's interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
I'm saying all your experiences, nothing is you don't do anything in half measures. Everything is just like intense, and then kind of like just break it or make it.
It chases you, right? So I think you manifest things. You manifest what you want, and if you want it badly enough, and you chase it, even if you chase it in your head, right? Like there are, and I kid you not, like there are design resolutions that come to you in the shower. Similarly, you can actually go and play phrases on your guitar if you haven't, or on your instrument, as long as you're sort of living it in your head. And it's like what Jeremy Clarkson says, right? No one cares if you die in a hospital bed, but everyone's going to talk about it if you die in a fiery car crash, right? So it's live your life like an anecdote, and sort of and die in one too, if all goes well.
That's quite some food for thought, I would say, for everyone. We're close to 2 hours, and our Insta feed's going to shut down soon. So one thing that we're getting some requests for you to share some of your music recommendations, anything that has inspired you or something that resonates with you. So if you'd want to, I think one way of doing this would be, if you want to create a list or something and put it on the social media, on your page, on our page, whichever way, or if you have any songs that you'd like to recommend right now.
Well, there's way too many, and all for different reasons. So I can put out a list, and that we can share on on each of our Instagram things. I don't know how to do it, but I'll figure it out, or you guys figure it out and let me know how to do it. And but definitely listen to, what's going on in today's day and age. Everyone should listen to Queensryche's Operation Mindcrime, and I think everyone has to listen to this Finnish guitar player called Mika Tiska, Mikatyskka. If you search for him, he's also called Mr. Fastfinger. I think that's like the happiest, most pleasant music I've heard. And the third, of course, is Bumblefoot. Bumblefoot was the guitar player for Guns N' Roses for a short while, and he's one of the most phenomenal talents you'll ever hear. He's released a new single during the shutdown or during the lockdown, so one should listen to that. But I'll give out a list for people who are interested. Was there anything else you were asking me, or was that?
For the music, there is definitely that. I'm just going to check if there's something on Instagram, if we have any more questions. I think we sorted. Viren, would you like to add anything before we close the session for today?
Maybe on the selection of music. There's a very interesting chap from Russia. I think he's originally from Israel. Maybe you have heard him. He plays also the acoustic guitar, and started and that is very interesting with many musicians, like with architects also. He started from the footpath, and he had to gather his money, passing on the hat, and that's how he enabled to travel from one place to the other place. I'm not getting his name, but very, very attractive man with long hair and long beard from Russia. And he's played together, jammed together on a record in Hungary on an album that's called the Flight of a Butterfly.
Flight of the Bumblebee.
No, Butterfly. This time it was Butterfly. Must watch. Don't miss it. there are people who are experimenting a lot with different music instruments and discovering, actually, by jamming with each other, new possibilities how to use a music instrument, especially engaging their body along with the music instrument. And certainly these people are highly influenced by travels to India, because India is presently, and has been always, I think, a large pool for inspiring people. It could be the 60s for Beatles. It could be much later, and I think it's still happening. It's still happening largely. We don't come to know, but I think with the news, social media, and the YouTube, there are many possibilities of just randomly. And that's what I liked also about Akshat's answer. You can't, and that's for Ritima, yes, you can't equate one with the other. I mean, in his talk today, sorry, in his talk today, it comes, of course, very clearly true that he is a man who treads a unknown path and tries to explore on that path new, and discovers new materials, new ideas, through his observation. I know him. He's worked with me for more than 6 years, and I know he's a hands-on guy. And I'm very sure he can make one day his own guitar. He can he can craft a guitar. I'm very sure maybe he has done it meanwhile, and that shows already his dexterity and his passion for doing things. And doing is, I think, by, like he said, you have to do it and observe it. What does it do to you? What does it do to your larger environment? So don't shy away from taking risks, because after all, you don't lose anything. You stand to gain always. And I think today's talk is more about that he dives into it. After all, it's only cold water, but you will learn by the end. And I think he is doing well there. He's doing good. That's all I can add.
I've been lucky. But you
Yes,
make your luck.
yeah.
I think so.
I think part of your factor of taking the plunge. Yes.
I hope our audience on Instagram heard that, because I will not be able to repeat everything that Viren just said. But Akshat, any last parting words?
No, I would like to share your nickname and Ritima's too.
Yeah, we will cancel the call before that happens. But
You can mute him best.
Viren suggests that we mute our speaker. Yes. But I want to take this opportunity to thank you. Oh, damn it. Sorry, we've just lost our feed on Instagram again.
Yeah. Right, there you go.
Okay, so Akshat's back. This time he's back from his personal account. So in case anybody wants to switch from architecture discipline to this to follow us, please do that. Okay, so, well, I lost my train of thought a little bit, but I think we've been having this chat for 2 hours now, and it's been really wonderful. I'm pretty sure we can go on for a longer time, but we're going to wrap up tonight. I want to thank, first of all, thank Matra for having this and for facilitating this entire series of conversations. They've been interesting. And Akshat, thank you for taking out your time, for sharing your stories, and for being rather candid about and honest about yourself and your journey. We really appreciate that. And like I said earlier, this is not about works and projects, but this is really about what makes all of that happen, and what informs that is the person that you are. And I think this gives us, I hope everybody got a little insight into the man dressed in black, not only as an architect and a designer, but as a guitarist, as somebody who has very, very intense passions for the things that he does. And I think the perhaps a little peek into the softer side of Akshat Bhatt. So thanks a lot for being here with us, and I thank you all for our audience on Zoom and on Instagram for joining us for our second Unplugged live talks with Matra. So thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.